lot of us new Q, majority of us that new Q, we're glad to call him comrade. I think a lot of us out here, we're glad to be able to call, Q, a friend. Q's job was getting intelligence, giving us intelligence where we can know what's going on in the battlefield, for us to go ahead and stay safe and kick the heck out of the enemy. That's what his job was.
Well, one of our most popular guests is my friend Manny Montenegrino, a former senior partner of a national law firm and an advisor to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He now has his own think tank called Think Sharp, where he's the president, and he's one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter because he brings a lawyer's mind to the BS of political and public life. And I'm delighted to have Manny back on now to talk about the Toronto shooting. Manny, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ezra. Glad to be here.
Well, you know what I like is you approach the news like a lawyer in cross-examination. You look at the words, you look at people wiggling around, and you ask clear questions. And I'm a fan, Manny, and I tell you, your segments on trade and the NAFTA battle have gone viral. I'd like to bring in your expertise on the Toronto shooting. Of course, it's a tragedy. An 18-year-old girl and a 10-year-old girl murdered, more than a dozen others injured. And we don't want to rush to judgment before the facts are out. But what's been frustrating to me, Manny, is how the media seems to want to stop the facts from coming out, bury the facts, spin the facts, because it looks like it was an ISIS terrorist attack. That's what it looks like as of when we're taping this. You know, ISIS has claimed responsibility. The man's name is Faisal Hussein, known to police, etc. I'd like your thoughts on this whole story, Manny.
Well, Ezra, I spent 32 years cross-examining experts. And to do so, you always have to start with the premise, I don't accept what you are going to say. I don't accept your expertise. And you've got to learn to question. And that's all I do on Twitter. It started with me, the very first thing, and I thought it was very concerning to me. Why is the new minister, Bill Blair, in Toronto? Why was he sent there? It is not a border issue, and it is not a organized crime issue. That's his new portfolio. And I found it very odd that Bill Blair was there holding court with the mayor and the chief of police of Toronto. Now, if you recall, Bill Blair was the ex-chief of police. Why was he there? And that was a bit, so that started the questioning. And then I questioned, why did it take 24 hours to name the perpetrator, the killer? Why did the press release come at the same time as naming the murderer?
You're talking about the press release that was purportedly from the family, but it turns out it was written by a Muslim political activist affiliated with CareCan. So, and that was kept hidden too. Who actually wrote the thing? There were a lot of curious details. Sorry, I interrupted you, Manny. Keep going.
Yeah, no. So when those facts started popping up, it just seemed irregular. It seemed improper. So then you start looking for more and asking more questions. And the more questions I asked on Twitter, the more I became concerned. I must say, I did think that it looked like it was orchestrated. There were too many hands involved in not having the right story out. That got me concerned. Yeah. And so I asked more questions. And then as I ask questions. A day or so later, we find out the truth, that the family is connected to a lot of violence. The brother is, in fact, his brother is, in fact, was a drug dealer, knows a good friend that has access to guns. So there's a lot of information that, of course, wasn't in the press release and, of course, wasn't given to the public. So it got me concerned. And then you ask yourself, what is the overarching point? Why is this happening? And there has to be a broader sense of, I mean, people don't conspire to do things unless there's a broader purpose. Mm-hmm. And the broader purpose is to give a message. And I think that's what concerns me. And the message is, be damned to the innocent victims that were killed. Be damned to the people that were injured. Be damned to the truth. Let's get a message out there to keep people happy. And that's when I became very concerned.
Yeah. You know, I think the facts are coming out slowly but surely. The fact that there was sort of a pause on releasing the key detail, the identity of the killer, these days when I see that, my spider senses start tingling. I'm thinking, if the name is released quickly, we know what the facts are. But if it is known to police and withheld, these days, it makes me think perhaps a jihadist, they don't want a Muslim-sounding name to be released because politicians are trying to tamp this down. And that seems to be what's going on here. The fact that, like you mentioned, contemporaneously, the same moment the name was released, a pre-written, well-sculpted, document was presented by a Muslim activist, but the fact it was written by him was kept a secret. There's just too many shenanigans.
Well, think of the time it took. I mean, first of all, the killer was known to the police. He's had 2 interactions with the police. The killer's brother is known to the police. Mm-hmm. So at the moment of the time that the killer was shot and they knew who he was, why the delay? Yeah. And then you have to ask yourself, to craft a document like that, and I have crafted documents like that, it takes, first of all, you've got to contact the individual, the family, or someone. And I'd like to know who contacted the individual. Certainly not the family. The family doesn't have the presence of mind when their son has committed murders to sit there and say, oh, I'm going to call an expert. Someone called that expert for them. Right. Who called them? Because I know, I mean, I think of my time as an immigrant. When I came from Italy, my father, my mother, they could hardly even know who anybody was of any expertise. So who called them? Mm-hmm. How long did it take him to get there? How long did he produce? Did he even talk to the parents? Right. Did he even know? So that must have taken hours to produce. And that was what the delay was. And why were the government officials cooperating with the delay to get this press release out? Because they knew who the murderer was. They certainly knew the family, but there was this conspiracy of creating a narrative that, in my view, and Ezra, here's what upsets me the most. I mean, I've seen politics and I've seen the worst of worst and the best of best. But there's this beautiful 10-year-old girl that was killed. And I have a beautiful daughter, and I remember when she was 10 years old. And to have these people forget that victim, to drive a narrative, breaks my heart, and I'm very upset, and I'm distraught with what's happened. I would want to know every detail as to why the delay, who caused the delay, how did it work out, but I don't think we're going to get that information. Yeah,
and not only have those real victims been forgotten, but the CBC in particular and the Toronto Star has tried to rebrand the terrorist as a they tried to humanize him. The CBC literally said he had $1 million smile. The CBC said he was humble and polite. That doesn't look to be true. The fact that.
Well, that all doesn't matter. I mean, everyone has a positive human side, and everyone, and this person had an evil side. Yeah. I'm not interested in that person. Right. I'm not interested. I'm only interested in that innocent daughter. Ezra, the story that broke my heart, and I don't know if your followers have read it, but the father and daughter were having an ice cream cone. Right. The father was shot and the daughter was shot. The daughter was sent to the Children's Hospital. The father went to another hospital in Toronto, and I'm not familiar. It might be St. Mike's. They were nowhere near it. They told the father that the daughter was going to die. The ambulance took him from his spot at his hospital to his daughter's to hold her hand while she died.
God.
That is, Ezra, there is nothing more vile and sinister to have now perpetrated this false narrative over this poor family. I tell you, there is nothing that breaks my heart more when I heard that story. And she is forgotten, he's forgotten, and the only interest of what I'll call the liberal biased media and the government officials is to drive this narrative, this Muslim narrative, which is trampling on this poor father and daughter's lives. It just breaks my heart.
Yeah. You know, I think this is a national story. In some ways, if the claim by ISIS that this was an ISIS terrorist is true, and we've seen police reports that Faisal Hussein's online activities came to their attention, so that seems to lend some credence to it. ISIS is not saying they directed it. ISIS is saying he was inspired by them, because they really want do-it-yourself people who watch the videos and get revved up, and so they're not claiming they ordered the hit from Iraq or Syria, but they're saying he was inspired by them. That rings true. And yet our prime minister is still on vacation in BC Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Every day, if you look at his official calendar on his website, it says personal day. He hasn't broken off his sandcastle vacation to even make a public appearance, a public statement. If this were George W. Bush and Hurricane Katrina, it could be almost a career ender. I haven't seen a single mainstream journalist, even mainstream media, CBC, Toronto Star journalist, even mention that Trudeau's AWOL.
Yeah, no, I don't judge Justin Trudeau with George W. Bush. I judge him for himself.
Yeah.
When there was that false, fake hijab story, and it was a minor incident, if it were true and it was proven to be false, Justin Trudeau tweeted, and not only did he tweet within hours, but he tweeted the victim's name, who she was not a victim. It was all perpetrated. It was all a fraud. Yeah. Here we have another innocent girl, 10 years old, killed, and no tweet, no heartfelt discussion about her, on holidays, ignoring. So I judge Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau, to his own standards. Yeah. If he did not do that tweet with that fake hijab story and move within hours, and here days have gone by and he's done nothing, I judge him to his action, much like we do with what we did with his groping incident. He speaks virtuous about his feminism, about the Me Too movement, but when it comes to himself, he doesn't act. And that's the same. So we've got a pattern here, and the pattern is in almost everything he does.
Manny, I want to ask you one last question about journalism. We've been trying our best to cover this story at The Rebel. I mean, we're a small operation. We don't have hundreds of staff like the CBC. But I think we've been doing a good job.
A great job.
Well, thank you. David Menzies has been great, but we're a small outfit. The Toronto Sun has been very good. Anthony Fury broke the news about who actually wrote that family's letter.
Right.
Joe Warmington broke the news about Faisal Hussein's links to ISIS and a possible trip to Afghanistan and Pakistan. So let me give full credit to the Toronto Sun. But so much of the rest of the media, Manny, has not only been a part of this narrative building operation, but they've actually criticized Anthony Fury, Sue Ann Levy, and Joe Warmington of the Sun, and of course they hate us at The Rebel. So what's strange to me, Manny, I mean, I'm not looking for praise from my competitors and rivals, but for them to focus their rage at us and at Joe Warmington for trying to cover the news, that to me gives away their game. These journalists have more rage for us than they do for the terrorist.
Exactly, and what I'm surprised about is, why am I not being contacted by any other media? I have listed really reasonable questions that really put the issue to test right from the beginning. I'm not contacted. I've been proven right on the hijab story, the false hijab, and I've been proven right on this. I ask detailed questions. I get attacked for asking the questions. This is a country where you're supposed to be asking questions. You're supposed to be, and I'm saddened that the media itself they want a narrative Everyone moves to the same narrative, and investigative journalism is dead. The only place you see it maybe is on Twitter, and certainly with you. And what do you do with someone who investigates? You try to diminish him. You try to destroy them. That's what happens to me. I ask simple questions, and the liberals attack me. I'm saying, I'm just asking a question. And the same happens with you. And Ezra, it's very clear. If you can knock Ezra and Rebel out, then there is a one voice, one non-investigative journalism in Canada, and we become much closer to those countries we deplore, like North Korea and Russia. We need to have people asking questions from all sides. And I'm dismayed that the media doesn't even ask the questions. The question as to who created the press release, the family press release, how long did it take? Who penned it? Who called the person? Was it a media person that called the person that did the press release? Like, that's important to know. Yeah. If the family didn't even know who he was, that's an alarming fact. Yeah. Why don't we know that? Yeah, we still don't know that. Well, Manny, it's great to talk with you. I hope we keep in touch, and I thank you for asking these questions. You're always welcome on The Rebel. I appreciate your who, what, why, where, when approach. That's journalism, and we're delighted to have you. Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
All right, there you have it. Our friend Manny Montenegrino. He's the president and CEO of Think Sharp. That's an excerpt from my daily TV show, The Ezra Levant Show. Normally it's behind a paywall, but I thought you'd like this video, so we put it on YouTube. If you want to subscribe to watch the daily show every day, including always 2 interviews a day, and I read my hate mail, just click on this screen and become a premium member.
Was the Toronto Danforth shooting a symptom of so-called mental illness, or was it an ISIS attack linked to one of the largest chemical weapons busts in all of North American history? On July 22nd, Faisal Hussein, a 29-year-old Muslim man born in Canada of Pakistani heritage, used an illegal handgun to open fire on innocents dining in Toronto's Greektown along Danforth Avenue. Hussein killed 2 young Canadian girls, aged 10 and 18, and wounded an additional 13, some of whom may never walk again. After an exchange with gunfire with police, Hussein turned the gun on himself. According to police sources, Hussein, who was known to law enforcement, had posted favorable comments on jihadi websites and had recently visited Afghanistan. After the massacre, Toronto police refused to release his name until much later, by which point his family had a professional letter ready to go, citing nothing to do with Islam, everything to do with mental illness. The note, by the way, was crafted by this Taqiyya-for-hire Muslim lobbyist, Mohammed Hashim, who on occasion gets money from Justin Trudeau's Liberal government, a guy whose public relations and media work has been widely credited by insiders as framing a new narrative for Muslims in Canada. But it would seem that ISIS didn't get the memo, literally. 3 days after the rampage, ISIS claimed responsibility for the attack through their Amaq news agency, stating that the attacker was, quote, a soldier of the Islamic State and carried out the attack in response to calls to target the citizens of coalition countries. Leaving aside the fact that Justin Trudeau pulled our jets out of the fight against ISIS for a second, media and political elites have been literally tripping over themselves to suppress the terrorist link, some outlets even going as far as calling for pity for the shooter's family. Which, well, brings me to the point of this video, the shooter's family. While the public knows very little about Faisal Hussein's parents, we know quite a bit about his older brother, Fahad. Fahad, presently in a coma owing to a drug overdose in 2017, was also known to police. very well. Fahad Hussein was arrested back in 2015 and charged with possession for the purposes of trafficking. By 2017, the case was forwarded to federal prosecutors to be sent to Ontario. Fahad was residing at a Thorncliffe Park address with his parents Farouk and Sultana Hussein as part of his release when he was arrested once again in February 2017 and charged with breaching his bail conditions after he allegedly was found to be in possession of shotgun shells. Released on February 21st of that year on a $10,000 bail, he was then ordered to live in Pickering, Ontario, with his surety, a 33-year-old man named Maysoum Ansari. At some point between February and September 2017, Fahad suffered a drug overdose and was sent to hospital, where he is now in a coma. But on September 20th, 2017, Durham Regional Police executed a search warrant at Ansari's address, where the shooter's brother had been living, after firefighters noticed a suspicious substance in the basement and alerted police. Police say that they discovered 33 guns and 42 kilograms of what was later identified as the very deadly drug carfentanil. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting. You see, carfentanil isn't your usual street drug. Carfentanil is 100 times stronger than its lethal cousin, fentanyl, making it 5,000 times stronger than heroin. Developed way back in the 1970s as a tranquilizer for large animals like elephants and bears, the synthetic opioid has been studied as a potential chemical weapon by countries including the US, China, and Israel. Now, according to Alberta's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Karen Grimsrud, an amount as small as a grain of sand can kill you. So if we're to believe that the shooter's brother and all his buds are in a gang of drug dealers, does the math actually check out? Well, on the street, heroin is often sold in points, i.e. 0.1 of a gram. 42 kilograms divides into 420,000, quote, points. Carfentanil, however, is 5,000 times stronger than heroin. 1 point of carfentanil would take down an elephant. Literally, that's what it was designed to do. So if you break it down even further, multiplying the points of carfentanil, 420,000, by its potency in comparison to heroin at 5,000 times the dose, well, you get this number. 2,100,000,000 street units of carfentanil. Now, I get that everybody wants to make a buck, criminals included, but given the risk of the ambient vapors alone of that much carfentanil in one's home, never mind the fact that it would cost you about $13.5 million to acquire that inventory, well, why would any drug dealer, if that's what we're to believe the shooter's brother was, need so much of this drug? Well, Brian Escamilla, a forensic chemist who was trained at the US DEA for over a decade, offers one explanation. I don't view it as a narcotic. I view it as a toxin and a potential weapon of mass destruction. And I think a lot of agencies are now looking at it from that perspective too. In reality, the toxicity of carfentanil has been compared to that of a nerve gas. According to the Associated Press's article, Chemical Weapons for Sale, China's Unregulated Narcotic, well, the article quoted one Andrew C. Weber, Assistant U.S. Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs from 2009 to 2014. Well, he says it's a weapon. Companies shouldn't be just sending it to anybody. Weber adds, countries that we are concerned about were interested in using it for offensive purposes. We're also concerned that groups like ISIS could order it commercially. Weber described various ways that carfentanil could be used as a weapon, such as knocking out troops and taking them hostage, or killing civilians in closed spaces such as train stations. Translation: by weight and volume, carfentanil is as deadly as traditional, military-grade nerve agents. So, given the shady connections of this family statement crafted by a media spin doctor and the fact that ISIS has actually said that at least one of the Hussein boys was their, quote, soldier, one really has to wonder, was Hussein's brother just a drug dealer who simply got too high on his own supply? Or is the Danforth shooter's brother in a coma because of an experiment in chemical weapons gone wrong? More specific to the news of the day, was the Danforth massacre simply an untreated case of mental illness? Or was it an ISIS plot with connections to the largest chemical weapons stockpile in North American history? Well, one thing I know for sure, media, police, and politicians better start asking these questions pretty soon, because who knows what else a band of so-called mentally ill men might be cooking up in Canada's backyard. Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. I so appreciate your support. Yes, I've been kicked off of PayPal and Patreon, but I'm still available both by e-transfer and Bitcoin. So if you like my journalism, you can't get anywhere else, please feel free to support by clicking on one of the links in the description below.